What's up, everybody? Welcome. It is Monday afternoon. It's Haberman and MIDDLEKAUFF. I'm Guy. That's John. If you're watching this on YouTube, great to have you. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button. Thanks for being here. Over half of you that watch this video are not subscribed, so subscribe.
If you're listening on the podcast, good to be heard.
And if you haven't heard the podcast, check it out. It's down in the description below. Thanks for listening on the pod, you OG listeners. John, we'll start with this little piece of news. You just saw this. This tweet from Dov Kleiman from Brandon Gouton. Some NFL execs around the league are getting annoyed with how much praise Howie Roseman has been receiving per Peter Schrager.
Is that like the equivalent of reporters get annoyed by Dov Kleiman stealing all their shit, literally, by this tweet? I mean, Dov didn't even see Schrager say this. Schrager said it. This guy found it, and then Dov stole it from him. It's like it's this cycle of, if I was Brandon, I'd be like, what the fuck? And the thing with Howie, it's like, I'm sorry, guys. If we all acknowledge the best player in the draft, like universally agreed upon, is not a quarterback, it's a defensive tackle. The team that goes to the Super Bowl for the NFC has a 10-point lead in the Super Bowl and ultimately gets beat by Andy and Mahomes, but is right there. And we go, God, the Eagles got a lot going for him. Has also a top 10 pick because of a previous trade this man landed because he was able to unload Carson Wentz, who fucking does not have a team, for a first-round pick, and also ends up with another player from that Georgia defense. Like, what are people supposed to say? Eagles, idiots. Like, Howie, overhyped. I mean, I would argue it's pretty objective. They're doing a pretty good job when it just comes to value, wheeling and dealing, right? Who is their best receiver? I don't know. A.J. Brown. Well, how the fuck did they get him? Oh, they traded one of their first-round picks last year. They had 3 of them. So they're 3 first-round picks. They took a guy, they landed A.J. Brown, and they landed Jalen Carter.
By the way, their quarterback is a second-round pick that some people thought shouldn't play quarterback. They just extended him. Nailed that pick.
Yeah. I mean,
his head coach is a guy nobody was about to hire as head coach, Nick Sirianni.
Guy, their starting left tackle had never played football before he got to the NFL. And now, like, the greatest center of all time, Jason Kelce, considers him like one of the best players he's ever played with, Jordan Mailbag. Complete freak. A rugby player from fucking New Zealand or Australia that they have converted. Oh, rotational linebacker? No, my starting left tackle. Like, think about that. Like, they just have a lot going for them. It's not really arguable. I think we all consider, especially those of us talk a lot about the Niners, of like, they're their biggest foe, right?
Fifth longest tenured GM in the NFL.
Do you count the what's it called? The sabbatical?
Where he moved offices?
and titles. He lost some juice, so
January 2010. Yeah, this counts that. You know who the longest tenured GM in the NFL is? Everybody out there watching and listening, I mean, think about this one at home.
Yeah, it's probably Seattle's guy.
John Schneider is 5th.
Well, I mean, do you count Bill?
Bill is 3rd. Mickey Loomis still the GM of the Saints, or did he just give the?
Bill's not the number. Bill's been the GM since 2000.
No, it's a trick question.
Oh, Jerry Jones.
Jerry Jones, the longest tenured general manager in the NFL. That's right, Jera.
Well, did you see that he's got this guy, Will McVay, who I think that they love him. Jerry loves him. He runs their personnel department. And someone asked at the pre-draft press conferences, like, why don't you just name him the GM? And Jerry's like, he's well compensated. He's the manager of all these scouts. I don't do that. That's his. But how could he be the GM when we got a GM?
Like, I did not see that. It's unbelievable.
It's like Jerry is so old school. Let's say you put most people in his shoes that are as rich as him, that have been around football as long. They would just keep doing what they're doing, right? Ultimately, they're the decision maker, but just give the dude the title.
Yeah,
but Jerry's like, I want to be the GM, damn it.
Nobody can say like the owner secretly told them they had to draft, because that was Michael Lombardi's theory on the Texans, is that the owner told the front office, you guys have to draft a quarterback, and that's why they drafted the quarterback and then also traded up and drafted Will Anderson because that's the guy they wanted. But in Dallas, there's no like the owner secretly behind the scenes. Just like if they draft, the story was they didn't draft Johnny, despite the fact that Jerry wanted to draft Johnny Manziel.
Well, because
right?
like Steven and his personnel guys were like, Jerry, don't do it. It's like Jerry's come a long way. He's listening to people in the room.
His son, Steven.
I'm always very, very fascinated by the look of a draft room, like what guys are wearing, kind of who's sitting. Is it a group with like everyone's involved in the room, or is it kind of a smaller room? And I always appreciate the Packers because they've obviously been one of the most successful organizations for the last 30 years. There is not the most dressed up guy has like khakis and a Packer pullover. I mean, you will see sweats, you'll see shorts. They've always been like that. From Ron Wolf to Ted Thompson, the Packers have no dress code. And I remember when I worked in the league talking to people, just so fascinated, like, yeah, we wear whatever we want. And on the road, wear whatever they want. And then a lot of teams, like Eagles, it was like draft, suits. The Raiders have always been like, their GM can fucking wear a hat and like a pullover. You do not need to dress up. Someone tweeted at me like the Cowboys draft room looks like an evil lair in like a Bond movie, kind of that half circle of like all the dudes wearing suits. Now Jerry Stevens' kid is sitting right next to, there's like a 13-year-old just like 3 seats away from Jerry, It's like McCarthy's, you could touch him. Yet the scouts and some of the coaches are pushed back. It's like this fucking 13-year-old right there. Just a crazy world, man.
I'm looking right now as we're talking for photos. I could swear I saw a photo that the Chargers draft room is just, speaking of draft rooms, in their locker room, I think, with like folding tables. Did you see that photo? I found one from 2022 where it's 100% their locker room in 2022. Because in SoFi, so I don't want to,
You think they do the draft at SoFi, not their facility?
I don't want to besmirch their name, but here's a photo from their draft room in 22 that I'm about to show you and it's definitely the locker. Now, maybe it is it says SoFi Stadium. Now, maybe they've updated since then, but yeah, it's not like you're talking about. You love to see draft rooms. Like the Chargers have not, unless they've updated, like these are lockers in their draft room.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
I wouldn't say they've poured a bunch of money into their.
I thought they built a nice facility somewhere.
Okay, so maybe this is old, and now they have a real draft room.
Yeah,
Charger fans, somebody can.
Another great visual from definitely might have been set. It might have been the second, third round was like the Giants, which is obviously an old school stiff organization. You got Mora, Tisch, Joe Shane, his crew, all jackets, sports coats. Then Daboll came in hugging people with Kafka. They're in New York Giants sweats like it's fucking December coaching. they come in and start hugging. And I just love how different groups inside the organization, like Shane's like, hey, this is our dress code. Daboll's like, we're good with wearing whatever we want,
Yeah, the coaches, this is not their day, right?
No, it's not. A lot of them, a lot
it's
of
like
teams,
Iguodala wears
not
a
in the
suit
draft
for the
room.
podcast, but a jean jacket for Game 7, right?
Very, very active coaching. Do you notice that the series? Always up near. I noticed it at the game, at Game 6. He was all over Game 7, just up near either Kenny Atkinson or screaming at Kerr or screaming at Poole. It's like, are you, second highest paid coach?
Doug Christie level activity on the sideline. When they took everybody out at the end of Game 7, I expected Iguodala to check in and to be like, oh my God, Iguodala was dressed.
No, he was in normal clothes.
He was not. Yeah, he was not. All right, we got a lot to get to. I guess we can hit on that, but let's start with the Niners draft. We did some would call it an emergency Friday night, 15, 20 minutes, immediate reaction. If you missed it, you can go watch it after the Niners made one of the most controversial picks of the 2023 NFL draft, John, drafting Jake Moody, kicker, Michigan, end of the third round. Big debate about positional value. Big debate about how good is he? The last kicker drafted this high lasted 1 year in the NFL. Aguayo, the highest. We talked about this a few weeks ago. Remember the highest drafted kicker last year was not good. So a lot of I guess a lot of risk. Definitely downside here. The upside that the Niners think they have is that they found their kicker to replace Robbie Gould. As Kyle Shanahan told Jake Moody on the phone, I didn't draft a running back. So we've had a couple days to chew on this, watch the whole draft play out. How we feeling about it a few days later?
Well, remember a couple years ago when the Bengals, their kicker was incredible, McPherson.
Yeah,
he was a 5th round pick. I think you could look at it several ways. Like, I have an issue with, and I'm a big believer in positional value, and ultimately the draft is a combination of adding sweet players. Like, the goal is to add guys that become impact guys on your squad, role players, just your team, and also knowing what they cost, right? Like, everyone agrees Bijan Robinson is fucking awesome. He's sweet, but everyone remembers when the Niners played the Falcons last year and they ran it down their throat. Oh, yeah, they have drafted a guy in the 5th round who's sweet. They have a million other offensive weapons on their squad already. Like, you don't need that. It doesn't make any sense. That doesn't mean the player's not good. That's also the 8th overall pick. Like, the difference to me between the Lions taking a running back at number 12, they had another 1st-round pick. And because of the trade, they had another pick in the top 35. I think it was pick 34 or 35.
And so also, by the way, they might have had 4 other guys with a 1st-round grade on their entire board, right? Given the way people thought about this draft.
Could have been one other guy, right? And they went, well, we already get this other pick, so it's actually Gibbs and this other player who turned out to be a tight end. So we're getting 2 players out of this one spot. The Niners had 3 picks. If they only had 1 pick in that round, I'd be like, God, that's a pretty big swing. But they had 3. So to me, that changes. Like, if you want to take a running back in the 1st round and you have another pick, like, you're packaging it with another player, right? Like, ultimately, the Lions took Gibbs and a defensive player, a front 7, a linebacker out of Iowa. Now, is that guy any good? I don't know. I saw a lot of people who were like, I didn't know Dan, because the guy's last name was Campbell. Is this guy related to Dan? It's like, listen, whatever. But the Niners had 3 picks. And one thing was clear watching these guys talk over the weekend. Robbie Gould coming back was never an option for them because it's all money. They cannot afford at this point in time moving forward to pay a kicker $4, $5, $6 million. They're not in that part of their team building anymore, right? And this is part of being a GM. It's why for so many years Bill got credit of doing. It wasn't just like, oh, he traded Logan Mankins a year earlier. It was like he got rid of Vinna fucking Terry, who had walk-off field goals in the Super Bowl and went on to continue his legend with Indy. But what did he do? He replaced him with a young kicker. Why? Because financially, you kind of have to do that. So to me, like, none of these players, the other guys they've drafted, are not going to play for this team or start for this team. Last year, it was like we loved their 2nd round and 3rd round. They got Danny Gray, they got Ty Davis-Price, and they got Drake Jackson. None of them started. And when you really look at the totality of the season, a team that became a powerhouse and won 13 games and was tied going into the second half, or toward the end of the first half of the NFC Championship game on the road with their backup quarterback. Those guys played 0 role really, beside like special teams. So these 3rd rounders more than likely are not going to play a big role. Where this kicker, I mean, in theory, is your immediate starter. And like we said, I think on Friday night, like I completely get it. Like, he just got to make kicks now. If he doesn't make kicks, it's a disaster. If he makes kicks, like, it's well worth it. They need a guy at that spot. Is there a chance, like, this was the only kicker that we thought was worth using a pick? We don't have a 4th-round pick. I think if they only had the 1 3rd-round pick, right, like a lot of drafts, right, you just got to pick a round, I'd be like, God, that's pretty crazy. But they had 2 other picks, and they got, positions of need. They need a tight end. They need a safety. So it's like, I judge you based on the amount of picks you have and what you do with them. I think when I just look at the totality of that, pick, I think they ended up trading up to like pick 87 or whatever. But like, I got no issue with it.
Yeah. When you have, you remember when Micah Parsons said he sent a Coke back at a restaurant because it was too expensive? Just fundamentally, he wouldn't pay whatever it was, like $3. I'm not paying $4 for a Coke. Like, it's just bad business. That's not generally how people think, right? Like, the more money you have, the less you think about cost of small things. And, or at least the less you have to. Some people do still. They're frugal, and that's maybe why they have money. But the less money you have, the more you are likely, I think, to drive a little further for a cheaper grocery store as opposed to if you have a lot of money, you might go just to the closest grocery store, even if it's a specialty food store and things are a little more expensive. And the Niners in this draft had they didn't have first and second round money, but they had a lot of picks. And what did they absolutely need? They absolutely needed a kicker. If I told you that the Niners drafted the positions they drafted, like rewind a week, and I said, here's who the Niners draft. They draft kicker, they draft safety, they draft tight end, corner, outside linebacker, wide receiver, tight end. Or I said tight end. But if I said those positions, you would know of all of those guys. I didn't tell you any rounds. I just said kicker, receiver, safety, linebacker, D lineman, tight end. You would know of those 6 positions, one of them is the most likely to play week 1. You would know that it's the kicker, right? You would know that from the jump. That's the guy. So if I told you they got him in the 7th round or the 4th round, you would know that guy is the most likely guy to play. Right.
Because the only pushback on the kicker is historically you don't need to draft a kicker high to get a good one. They go as undrafted free agents, which is 100% a fact. And if I was a bad team, like I would judge it differently if you told me the Texans use one of their 3rd round picks on a kicker. If, the Titans or the Tampa Bay Bucks or the Arizona Cardinals, I'd be like, that makes no sense. But the Niners, it makes much more sense. If you told me the Cowboys, the Niners, right? I'm talking teams that go, we can win the Super Bowl next year.
Right.
The Bengals had, or the Bills. I get it, especially when you factor in that they had other 2 picks surrounding him. If it was their only pick, I'd be like, that puts a even added pressure because that was your only resource to add other positions. But that wasn't the case. Now, they also, it's not like they haven't somewhat hedged their bet. They traded for Zane Gonzalez, who, when he's been healthy, has been viewed as a pretty talented kicker. So it's not like this guy gets to come in Trey Lance style last year and just given the job. There is going to be, like it or not, he's going to have to play better than this guy. I was thinking this today at the gym. If you told me that Moody has a training camp from hell, shanking kicks, missing them in preseason games, and Gonzalez is money, Kyle Shanahan will not give a fuck. They will keep Zane Gonzalez over this guy, right? If it's what was the guy's name? Aguayo situation, and Zane
Roberto.
is good.
Yeah,
they will not just let this guy, and then we'd be like, that's a disastrous pick, which it would be. But they're not just going to hand this guy the gig. They're going to be multiple kickers, right? Him and another guy who's on the team. That's just the way the business works. And they would tell you, well, if then Zane becomes good, it was worth, whatever. And I'd be like, yeah, because ultimately the money, I don't care. It does not matter. I just saw 1 million guys in the 1st round, including Kinlaw. I haven't seen the actual number, but it feels closer to 15, 16, 18, declining their 5th-year options. So the hit rate on just because you get your 5th-year option picked up like Tua does not mean you got some 15-year career ahead, right? Brandon Aiyuk might not be on this team in a couple years. Now, that doesn't mean Brandon's not a good player, but there's different lines of the 5th years, right? There's the Herberts, the Burrows, the Justin Jeffersons. Then Ayuk's not even in that group, right?
Right.
So this notion that 3rd round, what do you mean 3rd round? How many 3rd rounders have we seen fucking can't play dead in the Western? So this notion that the kicker who never missed a playoff kick, some legendary stories coming out of Michigan, how he wasn't the highest recruited guy. He kicks in weather, right? I like that because you might have to go to Philly or New York or these teams over the years.
Yep.
One thing Robbie had going for him, right? Long time in Chicago, you trusted him in cold weather games. Hell, he likes Chicago much more than he likes California. In terms of, it was up to him. Remember, he wanted to go back to the Bears years ago, and they franchise tagged him and argued with him.
One other thing on this, John, that's different than when we talked about it Friday night. We had the rest of the draft played out. And what happened? The Niners drafted the kicker at 99. The Patriots traded up at the top of the 4th round to take a kicker, 112. So as you said earlier, the Niners might have had this guy ranked much higher over the next guy on their board. The guy we talked about, Chad Ryland from Maryland.
That's who the Patriots took?
The Patriots moved up with the Jets and took him with pick 112.
So it was clear in this draft there were a couple guys head and shoulders viewed as not just draftable kickers, but really good prospects, right? I think that's fair to say.
Yep.
I mean, would you say Bill's got a pretty good idea?
Bill's got a good idea. Yeah. And you know, what's unique, it's not kickoff and kicker are not, and place kicker are not two different positions. But on the Niners, they're the same position, right? Wisnowski is not going to kick off. So we talked about this a ton. I'm not going to reiterate it. We talked about it on Friday night. I've talked about it before in the kicker breakdown video we did a month and a half ago. But you have to kick off so the Niners if they've got a guy that they think is the best place kicker and he's the best kickoff guy, and his kickoff numbers were better than Chad Ryland's, who was also a good kickoff guy from Maryland. Chad Ryland was a fifth-year transfer from Eastern Michigan, whatever that's worth. But then, you know, if he's the best kickoff guy and kickoff coverage has been a problem for you, that's also a part of it, right? You are factoring in, you are helping your defense as well if you get a better kickoff guy than you've had.
Well, then here's part of the value argument. If Bill had an idea trading up to get this guy at 112, from 99 to 112, which is obviously not many spots, the range of these kickers going, I would say coming to the draft, maybe they thought somewhere between 90 and 120. And obviously they don't have a fourth-round pick. So based on where the other kicker went, you could argue it's really not that crazy because both kickers could have been gone in the fourth round where they weren't doing business. And I saw someone also on a comment say, you know, it was a free pick. And that does get back to some of the things you were saying. If in defense of the people, like you were, like if I just give you $50,000 and you invest it well, you can turn that thing into 200. But if you just blow it, it's just gone. That was your money. Like that is your pick.
That's the psychology of saving of a sale, right? If something costs $150 and oh my God, it's 33% off. I got it for $100. You're like, I saved $50. Well, yeah, you spent $100 is what you did, right? So what did you spend it on? Did you spend it on something of a value? But you're right. Like the second you get a comp pick, it's just one of your picks, whether it's comp or not. Like your compensatory third pick is not. You don't play games with that thing when you treat your fourth round pick very seriously. Your comp third is more valuable than the fourth that you earned.
But I just think we look back a couple years ago when they traded Buckner for that pick 13. They're it's hard to say lucky because they executed then the trade back a spot, remember, and then they got back up to get Aiyuk. But if they had just used pick 13 on Kinlaw, we'd view that as just, an utter disaster, right? Like, you traded Buckner for this guy who is fucking stinks, injured.
Yeah.
You declined a fifth-year option there wasn't much dialogue.
Passed on a tackle.
Yeah. So it's just, but it shows you, like, they got 2 picks in that draft, and thank God for their second pick, right? And we're talking about a first round, right? In a loaded first round. I'm pretty sure that draft, the Burrows, the Herberts, the Chases, there were some pretty good players in that bad boy. So this notion that
the receivers,
you get to the third round, like you and I love Ty Davis Price. You just watch him. Everyone I texted couldn't get on the field, couldn't sniff the field. They had to make a mid-season trade for Christian McCaffrey. So it's just, nobody knows. It's the one thing I feel very, very confident on is I will never make any, like, you can make more concerted, like, conviction opinion on like a second day pick. Like, I really like this guy because consistently really good player, second, third round. I think once you get to like past pick 100, every single year you go to practice, you're like, wait, this guy was their fourth round pick, and the undrafted free agent by the second week of training camps above him. It happens every camp all over. It's the cool part about the NFL. It's the fifth round pick really means nothing. And you see all these players trying to tell you that.
Would you agree, especially on good teams? Like on a good team, here's the theory. The theory would be on a good team, you drafted a guy in the fourth round, you have an undrafted guy. What matters the most is not that you justify your fourth round pick. What matters the most is that you win. Right? So on a good team, your undrafted guy might just be better. You don't have time to fuck around with, and it makes us look bad. We took that guy in the fourth. We got to invest some more time in it.
I'd say your entire draft and even your high picks. Like ultimately Kinlaw, in a weird way, is irrelevant. He's not because they've had to spend money on it, but like his failure did not impact the success these last couple of years of the 49ers. Where, for example, the Raiders and Niners, when both teams sucked and they take Cleveland Farrell and Solomon Thomas, that sets you back a little bit because ideally you need that guy to be Khalil Mack. You need that guy to be Aiden Hutchinson. Once you get good, if you go for 20 years, look at some of Belichick's top picks, like whatever. But he's like, well, we found this guy in the third and this guy in the fifth. No different than the Niners. Well, it's like, well, we ended up with Warner and Hufanga and Kittle. But like shitty teams cannot operate like that. Like the Texans, if CJ Stroud and Will Anderson, if CJ Stroud's a top 7 quarterback, then Will Anderson ultimately doesn't matter. But if CJ Stroud turns out to be like Jared Goff, even a solid starter, Will Anderson also has to be pretty good too, or that whole thing's just kind of a disaster, right?
But by drafting Will Anderson, if Stroud is just a solid starter and Will Anderson's a really good, a Pro Bowl level player, it's a home run.
Fuck yeah, it is.
Right? Which without Will Anderson, if he turns into Goff, it's like, that's an overdraft.
If Will Anderson is Khalil Mack and ultimately CJ Stroud is just Derek Carr, you're in great shape. Those guys get extensions, right?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, it goes back to, I was just going to kind of talk big picture about the Niners draft class. When you look historically, it's, people ask, like, are we going to give grades on this draft class? No. I think this is the time, not that we're going to go deep into it, it's the time to evaluate a year ago, right? Like a year ago, this time last year, the Drake Jackson pick was what a great value, end of the second round. He flashed this year. But now is the time for Drake Jackson to step it up. This year. This is a big year for Drake Jackson. I don't know. It felt like an A pick a year ago. Today, I'd say it's a B minus, C maybe. We got to see. Like he's got to take the step they thought he was going to take. Ty Davis Price, loved the pick. Okay, played in 6 games last year.
Is he active on game day? Is he playing? Like are all three of those guys? I think there's way more pressure on Drake Jackson than did Danny Gray and Ty Davis Price, just because they have other sweet players at those positions.
Right.
So they need Drake Jackson, given that like they lost pass rushers, right? Their edge rushers got free agent contracts. So it's like, can Drake Jackson just become like, they don't need him to be the next Hassan Reddick or whatever, but can he just be like, God, we feel really good about this guy getting 25 snaps a game. And he can get, a sack number can't be 2, but it doesn't have to be 12. But it's like, he causes pressure. He has a couple games where at the end of the season, you're like, oh, he had 8 sacks, and he was just a fucking really good player for us.
To me, it turned into last year they couldn't count on him, right? They
scrapped him.
Yeah, you would love to know right now, I am getting 20 snaps out of him week 16 against the Seahawks on Monday Night Football or whatever, right? Like I'm counting on 20. I know I'm getting 20 good snaps out of him. But they can't say that right now. That's what they hope.
Well, but I was always taught in the first year between the second year, so like Drake Jackson's this offseason, for guys that didn't do shit, is enormous for them because they can really gain confidence. Typically, when you've drafted a guy, hell, even a first-round pick, but a first, second-round pick, they just tend, because of the turnover in the league, to get more reps in the offseason, which Drake surely will, right? He's going to get a lot of action. And unlike leading up to the draft, a guy like Drake Jackson, you're not working out or training, right? You're just constantly taking visits, meeting. You're just nonstop. So you just show up. You have to kind of start your workouts from scratch. Where this whole offseason, they started working him out, hell, during the season. And like in theory, if he's going to be any good, we should really see a big maturation kind of coming into this year.
Yeah, yeah.
We saw it with Banks, right? Last year. Took a huge jump from a guy that was unplayable to just starting left guard all season long. I think the Niners don't even think twice about it now, right?
And they would say if what you just described happens, it would look like that's what was the plan. Because you'd go, remember, USC, very different situations, never had a consistent plan for him, weird off seasons. Now we're going to put him in the system, give him 2 years. And
pick 60. It's not like he was pick 20, right?
Right. But what'd they get out of the draft? They got Spencer Burford, who was critical for them, 16 games. They got Samuel Womack, who projects as more critical for them and played a role, 16 games. And obviously they got Brock Purdy, right? Let's not bury the lead. The year before, they got Aaron Banks. They got Jalen Moore. They got Diamador Lenore. They got Talanoa Hufanga. They got Elijah Mitchell, right? That was the Trey Lance draft. But that was a lot of depth there and starters. The year before that, the Kinlaw draft, it was really Aiyuk, McKivitz, Juwan Jennings, Charlie Warner, all these guys are on the team. Bosa, Samuel, Wisnowski, Greenlaw. So when you remove kind of the positional value of each pick, they've had really good drafts. And, at this point, like you'd say Spencer Burford, 4th rounder, would you call that an A draft pick a year later?
Yeah, I've never seen a guy rotate, but yeah, I'd give it a B+.
He played significant time on a team that needed him, right? They needed him.
That's the pushback of like, would you draft a guard in the first round?
I'd give him the mental toughness on handling the rotation too.
If you get Larry Allen, for sure, but like you can always find guards in the later rounds, which is true of kickers. The difference is like ultimately, if I draft a guard in the 4th, he does not have to start for me. Like if Burford couldn't have started last year, someone else would have started, and you probably wouldn't notice much. Where like the kicker, a little like the quarterback, it's just you, right? Like it's once the Cowboys had that situation at the end of the season, there was no like, well, just rotate some other guys and like we got a slot receiver.
Remember they worked some guys out?
Yeah, well, it was you're fucked
before the playoff game.
There's no like middle ground with Moody. He either becomes your starting kicker and you feel good about it, or it's a disaster. That's just that black and white. Where all these other positions like kind of plays itself out. Like is Hufanga just going to be some lock all pro guy moving forward? I wouldn't go that far, but can he be a 5-year, 6-year starter for you? I'd feel pretty good. And that is a lot of positions. Most positions are not Kittle and Warner. They're going to go down like, is that like the second best middle linebacker we've ever had? Is that the most talented tight end we've ever had?
Yeah.
Right? That's not typical. Like, yeah, the 49ers in the history of the franchise, we've never had a Debo in a franchise that had Jerry Rice, right? So it just, like, most teams are like, yeah, we felt pretty good about this guy for a long period of time. That's fine. Where the kicker, it's like, you're either like Robbie Gold or it's just, we're just looking for a new kicker next year. And they will. That's the thing.
Yeah.
The one thing I feel good about this operation of like the safety linebacker, you can just keep drafting those positions and kind of the kicker. It's like if this guy's a fucking disaster, like Aguayo was, he just won't be on the team in 18 months.
It's just a missed pick. It's just like drafting, what's his name, the running back from Ohio State. We talked Trey Sermon in the 3rd round, right? He was pick 88.
You'll just pivot.
He was, you could barely be less of a non-factor than he was for the 49ers. That's what kickers kind of like quarterback in the sense that if you don't have a top 10 guy, you're just constantly looking for another guy. They drafted here's the other thing they did. They drafted 2 tight ends. I think there is something to be said. And I don't know if I know you saw what Kyle Shanahan said about Cameron Latu from Alabama, who they drafted 2 spots after Moody, because his testing is like off the charts, the wrong direction in terms of athleticism.
Like didn't jump high, didn't move well.
Somebody tweeted a graph of like all the athletic testing for tight ends over the years, and it's like lower left is where you don't want to be. But
like
Shanahan,
Kittle, like I think Kittle was the opposite,
like
all-time
upper right,
tester.
Yeah. But one of Shanahan's thing was this is a converted defensive end. We think there's more in his body, and obviously, like there's something to be said about getting him around George Kittle, who has become like the Pied Piper for tight end workouts. So there's that. It wouldn't shock. So, look, outside of Moody, somebody else in this draft class is going to end up playing like 14 games for them. Now, maybe it's D. Winters playing a bunch of special teams, but maybe it's Jair Brown week 5, something happens, and all of a sudden he's playing a bunch of safety. Like it happens every year. It's going to happen again.
Well, the second tight end is up for grabs. Like this guy can come in, he's coming in from Alabama, can win the job and just be playing right there with Kittle.
Yeah, you mean like take Charlie Warner's snaps?
Yeah. Dwellies, the Warners of the world, like that is a winnable position. And the reality is, like, if Kittle misses games, they just patchwork that position, right? They end up using Juszczyk over there some. They use an extra tackle. So it's like they don't just rely on the next man up at tight end to just play tight end. That's what makes that a little unique.
That's right. You are second on the depth chart is way less snaps than the number 2 tight end is way less impact in the passing game, right?
Yeah, like if Christian McCaffrey pulls a hamstring and has to miss 2 weeks, and I guess I was going to say, and Elijah Mitchell he'd have to be healthy too. If he could just get back-to-back games of 25 carries a game, right? Like if he's healthy, he would just be the full-time. They would just ride him.
That's the one thing. If you get if Kyle Shanahan signs you as a running back, you're going to have tape to show other people because there will be one game where you score. You get the chance. Like Trey Sermon had the chance, got hurt. Where
He
you
even
get
told
19
Moody,
carries.
he's like, we're not taking a running back here.
Did you think he said it as like even though that's what I wish I could do?
I think it's got to be an inside joke between him and like the scouts. Like Kyle just wants, we better take a running back every
Inside
year.
joke. I think we're all in on the joke, John.
It's not an inside joke, but I think it's an inside joke in the sense that like they talk about it a lot.
Yeah.
Like,
well, that's like did you send me or I sent you one of us the tweet that Kyle Shanahan said? All my buddies around the league when we drafted the kicker are texting me like laughing at me.
yeah.
So he's in on the jokes.
He's lucky that a lot of his buddies, and this is where they're able to do shit like this, is like 4 playoff wins in 2 years.
That's right.
I bet a lot of those people texting him would take that,
Yeah. Jay on the stream says, I'm 20 minutes behind. Hopefully you talk about undrafted free agent Joey Fisher. Shepherd University, John, a 4.9 40 reps on the bench, which was the most of any offensive lineman. Although there was Andrew Voorhees, who I don't know how many reps he had, but he did the bench. Remember, he's the guy from SC who did the bench with a torn ACL at the combine, who the Ravens drafted in the 7th round. Kind of an interesting pick. But yeah, Shepherd. You ever scout Shepherd College?
Couldn't even begin to tell you where it is. I do think that's one of the things that makes football so much different than the other 2 major sports. No shot at you hockey. Actually, did enjoy. I watched a little bit of the Bees game last night. They got 65 wins, got KO'd in the first round.
Oh wow!
Biggest, I think it's one of the biggest NHL upsets ever. But like that guy from Shepherd, it's not crazy. It'd be crazy if he made the team, but like he easily could be on the practice squad, right? Like in the NBA, there's usually 1 or 2 spots open on any, especially a good team. It's usually 1. Remember a big like the last several years, it was like Gary Payton against. It wasn't Patrick Beverly, but whoever that dude that played. Oh, Avery Bradley. So it's like a famous guy against Gary Payton, who's like famous name, but that's just like one spot. In football, there are a ton of spots open, right? Special teams, the practice squad jobs, like these random, like that guy can make the team. That guy can be on the 49ers, 100%. And he will be given the opportunity in practices when the threes come out. An underrated part about an NFL practice during camp, the threes get more reps. Now, they don't mean anything to us on the sideline. We're not locked in. Like, I don't care. But, like, the coaches all watch that film. Like, they're getting 3 reps at a time, right? You're out there. So you start doing some sweet shit, you get noticed.
Especially at that position group, offensive line, where there's Trent Williams and then anybody else can start for them, right? There's no like, well, we're not taking any snaps from Brendel. No, Brendel, there's not a lot of centers, but you know what I'm saying? Like nobody else, Trent's on scholarship. Nobody else is on scholarship. The other 4 spots are open and available. So when they didn't draft, here's the other thing. Historically, under Kyle and John, this is their 7th draft. The previous 6 years, I just quickly added it up. They averaged 2.5 linemen per draft, either offensive or defensive linemen. They didn't take any offensive linemen this year and took 1 defensive lineman. And as you said before, when I told you that, well, of course, like those positions there's no spots for you, right? But there is a spot for competition for an undrafted guy at offensive line.
Yeah, well, I mean, you got a couple spots on your practice squad. I just think any team going into training camp, because it's hard to evaluate the lines. Especially, it's impossible to evaluate the offensive lines during OTAs because there's no pads. You can evaluate like, oh, Drake Jackson looks quicker off the line of scrimmage, but it's not like his strength. A lot of positions are set now, right? Like they're not worried about Banks, right? They're obviously not worried about Trent. I think Jake clearly established himself at center. And if Burford is just like, they're not going, God, he's gotten worse. If he's just solid, like he's just going to be your starter. They'll figure out the right tackle spot.
Yeah, which is this. I think it's McKivitz right now.
Yeah, so exactly. So but he'll still have to somewhat earn it. But it's like him versus one other guy.
Yeah.
The other spots are open. It's like, well, just competition. Who's going to be our backup? Who's going to be our swing guy? And that's no different than every single camp, right? And when you are, the thing is like for the most part. It's very rare for a 3rd rounder to get cut. You're not guaranteed to make the team starting in the 4th round. I can easily cut you as like a wide receiver, a tackle, a safety, whatever. You can get cut. Obviously, 5th, 6th, 7th get cut
Tyler
all
Wilson.
the time. You're not guaranteed anything. And sometimes, like, what if a practice squad guy on your team has gotten a lot better? What if I claim a guy on another team? There's just a lot of moving parts in football, right? There aren't as many guys on scholarship as it often feels. And even if a guy's on the team, it might just mean like, well, we just haven't been able to upgrade it yet, but we're fucking looking.
Yeah. They also don't have like they don't have a lot of safeties depth right now. They got like 3 guys.
Well, they got
Before the
Gibson and
draft.
Funga, right?
Right,
Are
and
they
then
starters?
George Odom.
Which is special, yeah.
It's like George Odom they signed last year. You're right. Special teams. Gibson they added late. That's it. So, like to me it makes sense. You are projecting a year out to replace Gibson, but you're also thinking the first guy we draft, if we draft like your safety might whoever you drafted, and in this case it was their first pick, just might have to play early. One thing happens, one injury happens. Just it can happen quick. And linebacker, right? They don't have a ton of experience at linebacker. They've got Fred and Greenlaw. And after that, it's the 2 hyphenated guys, Flanagan Fowles and McCrary Ball.
Well, losing Al Shire is a loss.
Oren Burks.
Al Shire at any moment could start for you and you could win a sweet game against the best team in the league, right? With him taking your 50, 60 snaps.
Yeah.
Like that's a real NFL player. That's a loss. I mean, now I think the one thing they'd say is like, we're pretty good at this, figuring out that position, right?
But my point is not. I'm just saying they drafted that position because they need it, as opposed to drafting offensive line or defensive line. Jesse on the stream says, "Did y'all see the video of Sean Payton taking a fat bong rip, electric, with a kid in a Warriors shirt? By the way, Sean Payton getting after it. He's getting some instruction on how to do it." And I've not seen this. Have you seen this?
Yeah. It's like, yeah, weed's legal in Denver, guys.
This is a lot. We've come a long way since Laramie Tunsil.
I think you remember his daughter, maybe that's in L.A. I think his daughter lives in L.A.
Just hanging out with the fellas.
I could see him come over, yeah. Maybe, it's one of those where like buys his daughter, boyfriend, a couple other friends. Then they go, yeah, who knows?
What else we got? Oh, we got to talk about Brandon Aiyuk, who tweeted that his agent called him Sunday morning, and it scared him because he thought he was about to get traded.
Thursday
morning. Sorry,
day of the first round, right?
Thursday morning. Yeah.
No, it would have been Friday morning.
He got the 5th-year option picked up on Sunday. Officially, we found out.
No, it came out
mixed up right now.
It came out on Friday. I think he got called Friday morning by his agent, freaked out, and then it was official before the draft started on Friday afternoon that his 5th-year option was picked up.
Okay. So there had been some talk about whether or not he had 1 year left, but maybe there was more smoke to were they open to trading him at some point in this year's draft? Because he thought something could be up, right? It wasn't something everyone just made up. If it was a media rumor, he believed it, right? I don't think his heart jumped 2 weeks ago when his agent called him.
I would not have done it, but I do think they were open to the possibility, again, a big picture move, they've been ruthless before, for trading him for one of those wide receiver needy teams in the early 20s. If the guy that they wanted, I would imagine it would have been a lineman, right? They're not trading him for a safety or a corner. To me, they would trade him for like, this is our plug-and-play right tackle, who maybe can play left tackle, right? Who's, a type guy that like, well, if Trent went down, we could bump him over. Feels like their type move. A big body, or maybe some sweet pass rusher. Well, none of those the first wide receiver that came off the board was 20. I wonder if those guys had gone, like that happens in a lot of draft, and those teams like the Chargers, the Giants, I know the Giants ended up taking a wide receiver, but the Ravens, would one of those teams have been open for trading? Like last year, remember Hollywood Brown got traded to the Ravens in the mid-20s. I think Brandon Ayuk's a better player than him at the same time, and definitely a more consistent, like easygoing guy. That I wonder if it was simply business. Like it was just, we're going to keep our options open. And I know a lot of people, because I think I tweeted this out, like, well, Justin Herbert got his option picked up on Friday morning too. Like it's a little different. Like John Lynch couldn't answer with a straight face Brandon Ayuk situation. Obviously, Justin Herbert's not on the fucking trade block. And I'm not even saying if Brandon Aiyuk was on the trade block. I wonder if they had just had discussions. Because they had admitted they had received calls about him. So his value to me was like based on previous. Would you have traded him for 21 for a right tackle? Like if that had happened, are we sitting here like that's a pretty ballsy fucking move? I would say
It would have been right. I mean, and the receivers all got drafted together basically at the end of the first round
in rapid fire, all three.
Four in a row.
4 in a row.
Yeah, 4 in a row. Smith and Jigba, Quentin Johnson, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison. Boom, 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 boom. So those are the teams you're talking about. You wouldn't trade him to Seattle.
Doesn't that feel kind of what he would go for? 22, 23, 21?
Where he was drafted? Well, I mean, it's tough, right? I would say it's where he was drafted and his value is better now than it was when he drafted, but it's a sliding scale. You also have the cost now is going to be higher on him than when he was drafted, right?
Well, if you traded for him like Hollywood, I think Hollywood might have been on his 5th-year option. You would have 2 years. If you pick up the 5th-year option, you basically have 2 years under that total, right?
The thing that makes it hard, though, John, is he has a higher value now than he did when you drafted him. But when you draft around the 20s a receiver, this is what you're expecting. So if you're a team drafting it.
Well, do you think Jordan Addison's a better player than Brandon Aiyuk? Like what you've seen out of Brandon Aiyuk in the NFL in the biggest moments, like do you expect Jordan Addison to be that good?
No, I think you bet against it. But at the same time, he was the Biletnikoff Award winner 2 years ago. Like if you're the Vikings, you go, what makes more sense for us? We're about to change quarterbacks next year. Why would we acquire Brandon Aiyuk now when we can just draft Jordan Addison and hope that he becomes as good or better a player, right? It's like he's worth more than 24 to you, but if you're sitting at 24 and you have receivers available to you that you like, you just take those guys.
And it's like part of the reason you're trading for him because you're not willing to pay Debo and him. Well, we're about to give Justin Jefferson way more money than Debo got, right?
Right. Well, imagine put the shoe on the other foot. The Niners are sitting there at 21 and they need a receiver, and you got 3 receivers available. Do you trade 21 for Brandon Aiyuk, or do you just draft the best receiver there?
I saw some highlights of Zay Flowers. I wasn't super locked into Boston College. I was like, God, I see a little Debo-ish here. He looks kind of sweet.
The problem is the argument is like, well, should you drafted a tight end for Lamar instead of the Zay Flowers type? But you're right. I mean,
the comp they use, which it's the easiest thing to do. It's like, who's Michael Mayer? Gronk. Who's Zay Flowers? Tyreek Hill. Like, no, those guys. So there are going to be 2 Tyreek Hills playing in the NFL at the same time when we've never had a Tyreek Hill playing for 50 years of football.
Yeah.
But who knows?
But I think the fact that he, and who knows who they liked. Like, the problem is there wasn't even the tackles didn't go anywhere close to the receivers, right?
Maybe it's a D lineman.
Maybe. Who would they have? You couldn't do it. Could you do it for Kalijah Cansey?
Was that the guy from Pitt?
Yeah.
I heard Russillo, like, you are not allowed, just because the guy's from Pitt and somewhat undersized, to then compare him to Aaron Donald. Same type deal. It went like back-to-back-to-back picks. It's like, who's this guy? Tyreek Hill. Who's this guy? Think whoever the best players are at the position. It's like, this is a bad draft, and we're in the late teens, 20s, and we're comparing them like 3 straight first ballot Hall of Famers. What are we doing?
I wonder if they would have felt like we need a top 15 pick in order to trade Aiyuk, right?
Yeah, maybe it was just
because again,
trading
him for 22, trading him for 21. Like, the perception in this draft was you're getting a 2nd round graded player.
Yeah.
So if you could trade him and get one of the top tackles, all the guys that went in the top 14, and get Broderick Jones, or I don't even know, Peter Skoronski, maybe they do that.
One thing I'd heard about Skoronski, he got short arms. People think he's more likely.
Well, I don't think they would have liked Broderick Jones or the guy or Paris Johnson. I think. Yeah.
When did Broderick go? Didn't he go like 14 to the Steelers?
14, and the tape was just like blows your mind when you watch him move. I mean, he moved. I'm not saying he's Trent, but it just made you think of Trent when you watch a man 6'8". He's 308.
Where'd he go to college?
Stink. Well, I'll give you a guess.
Georgia?
Yeah. So,
do you know that Georgia had 21 players drafted the last 2 years, and 14 are off the 21 defense? So, of the 21 defense, obviously, because, a bunch got drafted last year, but then several got drafted this year, like Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter, another corner. 14 guys off one
Keely
defense.
Ringo.
14 guys.
Eagles took Ringo, right?
You know when you're like watching team play, it's like, who's a pro on this unit? Everyone. And 4 of the backups are also.
Yeah, there's only 11 that play defense, John. How did 14 of them get drafted?
So 14 of them got drafted. 7 of them were first rounders.
Wow.
They didn't win back-to-back national championships.
Stetson Bennett practiced against pretty good defense.
Yeah. Did him and Haener, they went back-to-back picks?
Haener went, and then Stetson Bennett went. Yeah, back-to-back picks. To the Rams.
Jake definitely made the right decision because he would not have been a 4th-round pick if he would have came out last year.
No, I remember you talked to some people last year about where they had him.
Yeah, late-round pick. And in a weird way, I wonder if getting injured helped him because it was like the team fell apart, right?
He fell apart. Then he came back.
How about Cropper did not get drafted?
No.
What happened?
Got signed by Dallas, I think.
Injuries? I mean, I remember watching him thinking like he's an NFL player.
I know.
Something was off there.
I don't know. Weird.
Not a great sign.
No. Haener goes to New Orleans. Where Derek Carr is. So and Jameis is.
Did the running back get drafted?
Not that I saw. But he's a 5th he's an older running back.
Oh yeah.
You tell me.
No, I don't. Jordan Mims. Now it's weird at positions like, the top LSU, that Butte guy didn't get drafted in the 6th round. Like things get weird with position players quick. Jordan Mims signed with the Buffalo Bills and undrafted free agent. Not gonna lie, kind of like that signing. If you told me Jordan Mims makes the Bills, I guess they signed Latavius Murray today too, but who knows? Like, this is the part of the NFL. Like, Latavius Murray, at 31 years old, what if Jordan Mims just comes in as good?
Yeah.
It happens every single year all over the league.
Veteran player already.
Yeah.
I'm just saying he's played a lot of football.
Latavius.
No, Jordan Mims.
Oh, yeah.
Seattle, Philly, Dallas, NFC. We hit on this a little bit on Friday night, but it was pretty clear coming into Friday night that the Niners didn't need immediate starters, but they needed to draft players that would help them on the continuum of remaining really good as your team gets expensive. Because I thought Philly was, and I'm not on a limb here, most people probably would agree, Philly and Seattle were 2 of the most interesting teams going into round 1. Philly, definitely. Not just because they won the NFC, but because they just signed their quarterback to a big contract. So now, once you start sign the quarterback, your clock really starts ticking on. You better be able to be drafting starters. And they drafted, we'll see if they turn out to be starters, but they look like incredible value, high talent players, right? Seattle, we talked about Smith and Jigba. They took another running back. They took a guy that I really like, Zach Charbonnet. So they have 2 running backs now. They've just, I think, really surrounded Geno, who is, in a weird way, they're better because of him, but they're the one reason that you wouldn't say they terrify you, but they're just better. Like Seattle and Philly, a lot of ways we could go here. Philly is a part of this. Seattle is part of this conversation in the NFC. That's the simplest way to put it. Like they are just part of the conversation. They're one of the teams and they play the Niners twice that you just got to go through and beat.
They lacked, when the Niners 2 out of 3 games killed them last year, and it felt like they just lacked a little bit of talent. Because ultimately, let's use the Geno Alex Smith comp. Clearly a high-level guy, been through a lot of shit, mentally pretty tough, has probably a more explosive arm, probably in a weird way has this lower floor when he's off.
Yeah.
Will just do dumber shit. But clearly, if you have a really good team around him at this point in time.
Tries to make more plays, which leads to that.
Yeah, you could win they won 9 games. If their team was a little better, maybe they could win 10, 11. And I think their team definitely is I thought their first pick was fascinating. Who only they know, and maybe they'll admit it, but they're in a weird way for a team that is cocky. They don't tell their own shit that often. They don't come out and say we were going to take Anthony Richardson. Right? It might come out in a year they were all dialed in on that, that was going to be their pick, and maybe they would have.
They're smart. They wait for the guy to hit before they say that.
Yeah, he was our number 1 guy on the draft board.
Remember that was good with Russ.
Well, and this would be the classic, like Jalen Carter gets arrested, it'll leak out like, we have no problem taking flyers, but we were never touching him, you know? And I think them passing on that guy, which they've taken over the years, I wonder if they went like, let's just take a guy that we view as Richard Sherman, you know, as a wired like a Baldwin, just our type guy that we consistently won with in Witherspoon. Like, they didn't really overthink it there. He was widely considered the number one DB on everyone's board. And, like, in the immediate, I would say Jalen Carter would be a problem. Like, that's a tough guy for Burford to block, right? Like, right now, they did one-on-ones. If I had to put $100 who's going to win the first rep, like, I'm probably leaning Jalen Carter. Now, there's more to it. Like, can he get in trouble? I mean, Jalen Carter is considered shitty draft. He's an elite player in any draft. 2 years ago, that draft that had 14 guys drafted off the team, it was like, well, Jalen Carter is the most talented guy on the whole group. Like, of all the guys drafted, he was the number one talent. That doesn't mean he's going to have the longest career or anything, but, like, he was much more talented than Jordan Davis, who went, 12 or 13 last year to the Eagles. And Seattle, I give them credit because I'd say historically, like, kind of that's who they want.
Yeah.
And they're just like, let's just go with the guy that's fucking wired like the guy we want. Right? Because ultimately, Jamal Adams is wired like they want. He just has limitations as a player, can't cover. But I do think he, like, cares about football. He just gets injured now all the time. But, like, he wants to play football, and, like, he just wants to be all in on just kicking ass and taking names. He just can't cover, and obviously injuries now just – I mean, he missed most of last season. I even forget the injury, but he's been hurt since he's gotten there. They do like guys that are wired like that.
And you said you've heard great things about Witherspoon.
Oh, fucking bull! People love the guy, and love the tape. Like, he was just an ass kicker.
Yeah,
but I think, like, historically, the kind of the gunslinging, you know, Seattle's got a little Jerry Jones in them. Like, get him with us. Jalen Carter's kind of the pick, and sometimes you benefit long term when you're like, let's take a guy we also love, but it's a little bit safer. Zach Martin, remember that's who they didn't take Johnny Manziel. Let's just take a guy, might not be as sexy at the time, just a guard or a tackle, going to be a right guard, right tackle, whatever. Oh, look back up, he just made some Pro Bowls and just a core guy of your team. I think that's the way they lean there, which was a little surprising because I think they easily could have. A lot of people thought they were going to take Jalen Carter. I did. I mean, I was like, John Schneider, Pete Carroll, like, that's right up their alley.
From a Niners perspective, now he ended up on the Eagles, and you still have to go through the Eagles, right? He and Nolan Smith.
But they're more equipped to handle him because of, like, the older guys they got. Like, ultimately, Seattle's a pretty young team.
No. Yeah, I'm just saying I agree with you. I'm just saying from a Niners perspective, he still ended up in a place that makes their life difficult. They got to play
them.
They got to win.
They play Philly
next year in Philly. But just big picture, I think a lockdown corner is less of a problem for the Niners than a run stuffer or interior pass rusher, right? Because, and we've seen the Niners like play Jalen Ramsey. They have chess pieces offensively more so than just, you know, their DK Metcalf is a certain type of receiver. Debo and McCaffrey, these guys, Kittle, these are different types of pass catchers that you can scheme open as opposed to it's just one-on-one battles, snap after snap after snap. The guys that create problems for them. And they've done, I remember, who was the guy who was like the Aaron Donald stopper?
Burford?
No, not Burford. A couple years ago, the Niners had the guy. Brunskill, yeah, the Aaron Donald stopper. But like, those, to me, pressure on the Niners quarterback is the problem. Because the key to the Niners is whoever Kyle has taken snaps, as long as he's got enough time to do what Kyle told him to do and put the ball in the hands of the guy that Kyle's getting open.
You can gain yards, yeah.
So, like, purely from Niners v. Seahawks, he's a good player. If Witherspoon's a good player, that makes the Seahawks better. I'd prefer they had an all-pro corner than an all-pro defensive lineman.
Yeah.
But that guy ended up on the Eagles.
What's the number one thing like when the Niners play the Eagles, if they were playing this Sunday, what would you go? Well, Debo told us after the Super Bowl, he's like, you see their DBs? We would have fucking smoked them. But that's the point was Debo, yeah, how do you block? Like, the number one thing we'll say is, like, they got about 10 guys up front. Like, this is going to be, Trent can't block them all. So it's like, Banks going to have to play his best game. Burford's going to have to step up. McKivitz and Brendel got to bring it, right? Because last year the Eagles, most people like Slay and Bradbury, arguably the best on paper cornerback duo, and all the Niners players after like these we just ran circles around them. But that we were like, well, you got to block their pass rushers, and now you gained one of their pass rushers, but they also just you couldn't have. He was by far the best replacement for Hargrave in the draft, right? I mean, he's again universally accepted. It wasn't even an argument. Yeah, best prospect. Why? He's 6'5", he's 310. He was literally the most talented guy and arguably the most talented defense of the last 20 years. That had 14 players get drafted and 7 go in the first round.
Feels like he got lucky going to Philly. Like how many places would you say if you're his agent and you were like a little unsure about him, the guy, like, we need somebody. You'd be like, you don't want him to go to the Niners. Obviously, that was not a possibility. You'd want him to go to Seattle. They didn't do it. You'd want him to go to Philly.
You want him to go somewhere where he's not walks in immediately and goes, I'm the best player here.
Yeah.
Where now he walks into his...
And with a solidified organization, like a head coach and GM that can kind of tell him what to do.
Well, here's the other thing.
Their careers aren't made.
I watched some of the press conference of... For some reason, I thought Nolan Smith was a little smaller.
Well, because everyone talks about him like he's small.
Sitting next to Jalen, who's obviously enormous, Nolan looked huge, too. I'm like, these fucking guys... That to me was like Georgia, like Jesus. And he's like Nolan, I think a lot like last year, Nakobe Dean are like their Fred Warners of the program, like character, leaders. Remember when Nolan Smith, you remember that viral moment at the Combine? He ran like a 4.48 and all of Georgia's team was like it looked like this incredible area in their facility. Must have been like 50 guys just went nuts. Like he's beloved. And Nolan's like, this is my brother. Just like Jordan is, just like Nakobe is. And like, we stick together here. We'll do whatever it takes. So part of it is not just you have older veterans, but you have other guys that like Jalen knows intimately well. Like, I mean, think how much time.
They drafted the Keely Ringo. I mentioned it, but they got 3 Georgia guys this team, and then they've already drafted multiple Georgia guys in previous years.
How much time have those guys, they're all defensive players, just spent together the last 4 years? The amount of hours together, right? Buses, meetings, practice, sideline sitting next. You don't sit next to like Stetson Bennett on the sideline. You sit next to the other defensive guys.
Right.
Like they have talked to each other, parties, food. I mean, it's a very, very unique situation for the player. Honestly, it feels like one of the most unique things we've ever seen.
He's got 4 other defensive teammates from Georgia. Not to mention, I mean, if he had to, like, you can't hang out with Georgia guys, I guess he'd go hang out with a couple Alabama guys. They all been through the wars together. Hurts probably know each other, right?
It's where Seattle, maybe they just thought we have this young nucleus. This is where I give them credit. It's not worth potentially throwing a wild card in here that if it fails, it could throw everything that we kind of work to like pivot off Russ. Because they're going to get a lot of credit. If they make the playoffs again next year, and I would imagine a lot of people are going to pick them to be a wild card team, pretty unreal couple of years for Pete, I would say, pivoting off Russ. And just like, what if they win 19 games in 2 years when everyone thought they were going to suck ass? And what if this year they're just better? It's like, yeah, they got a little more pop to them.
Also, if you're them, just think about all the receivers in your division, right? Cardinals, Rams, Niners.
I would say that adding Jackson to go with DK, you'd feel for the next several years pretty good about that little crew.
I mentioned the other day, their number 3 receiver was like Noah Fant, but their number 3 receiver in the playoffs against the Niners was Marquise Goodwin. That's unacceptable.
Yeah. So
whatever that guy is, like he's gonna be, and he played on that. He kind of been on that team where there's a bunch of really good receivers around you. You know, his brother played is a minor league baseball player in like the Pirates organization.
Whose
like
brother?
Cameron Smith and Jigba. I think it's Cameron or something like that. Smith and Jigba.
He did a video. Was he in the big leagues?
Oh, was he? Maybe he is in the big leagues.
I think he might. I think he might be.
I love my favorite thing. It's like obviously just for the Bose headphones. When they do the video of like the kid puts on the headphones, he just watches a video from like his mom and his dad or his brother or his coach. I don't know if you saw Bryce Young's. Bryce's dad was so proud. His mom was so proud. Saban was just like, "We're so proud of you at Alabama." You know, it was just like straight Saban. Was not emotional. It's one of the greatest quarterback coach players he's ever coached. But I do enjoy those videos because it's always a little bit of a
they're good
tearjerker.
I mean, the best, I would say, the video of the weekend is the Cowboys director of scouting drafted his son.
Right. Deuce Vaughn's a good player.
I remember watching he's the little number 22 running back. I thought was fucking awesome.
Yeah, he's a really good player, right?
Like, are we sure that guy's not getting serious? I think it was like the 5th or the 6th. Feels like that guy's getting legitimate snaps on the Cowboys this year.
Yeah, I mean, Tony Pollard's coming off an injury. Zeke is gone.
That was a cool moment.
It was really cool. It was really cool. Did you guys ever draft when you were in Philly? Did you ever draft?
Well,
somebody's kid?
Andy's got it. I noticed it. They did it again. In Philly, the couple big things were, we're always drafting a BYU guy. That was selfish for him. Always trying to get a Jewish guy on the squad, right?
Is there a Jewish guy every year?
Well,
available?
it was like Schwartz and
Schwartz.
It's few and far between. But if they were around, this year they drafted an SMU wide receiver. Well, Clark Hunt's an SMU guy.
Okay.
And Clark went and they handed him the phone because Veach is like, calls him in like the 5th round. He's like, we had one goal when the day started. And I told my owner, we were going to land someone from SMU. And then Clark gets the phone. He's like, proud to have a fellow Mustang. I watched a lot of you play. And you could tell like he thought he was really good. So it's like, okay. And if you're that good, why would you not? Like, owner, who do you want? Yeah, fuck it. Let's take him.
Well, the owner's been saying it. He's probably been texting for all season. Like, are you guys watching SMU? And they're like, no, we're not.
It's an easy one. That's one thing. It doesn't feel like Kyle gives 2 shits about anyone Jed wants.
No, Jed doesn't feel like Jed says anything. Doesn't feel like Jed has made a suggestion on a pick.
I think that's a genius Andy morale booster of just keeping everyone happy in the room, non-football. It's like, then the owner's got a little pep in his step, got someone to root for during training camp, you know?
It also takes a little pressure off. It sends the signal, but like, guys, we're not doing brain surgery in the 5th round here. Just, you know, like guys, the Niners got lucky when they took Brock Purdy. We all understand that, right?
This guy's just as likely to be a quality control guy for me in 3 years than he is our starting right guard, you know?
That's right. He's got early retirement written all over him.
Yeah.
So whatever. Yeah, did Sac State's linebacker get drafted? Matu?
3rd round, Belichick.
3rd round?
3rd round. Now, Bill, this is when I said that Bill moved up to get the kicker, like I showed the value. His value chart, I think, tends to be a little different than a lot of other people in the league.
Interesting. I thought the Niners, so I did, Stanford spring game like the other day, and Troy Taylor said, oh, John Lynch called the other day just to like see how we're doing. And I started thinking, I'm like, he called you a week before the draft to see how you're doing. I was like, Troy, are you saying the Niners could draft somebody from Sac State? And he was like, well, we do have the linebacker that a lot of people like. Niners like him too. I wonder if the Niners like that. We're going to draft that guy because John Lynch called Troy Taylor the other day. Did not confirm it was about him, but I don't know why John be calling just before the draft other than to.
Well, when you say he would have been in,
Troy.
Wouldn't you say that he might have been in the mix to be one of those 3rd round picks? He went pick 76.
Yeah, and the Niners took the linebacker from TCU. What pick number?
Definitely the 4th day. I mean, the 3rd day.
Yeah, I got it right here. He went 76.
He's got to be the highest drafted Sac State guy in the history of the program, right?
Oh well, the Niners took the defensive end. Fifth. D. Winters went in the 6th. Robert Beal, who was the 4.4 Georgia defensive end, 4.4, 440. Yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe they would have taken him. They took it the cornerback. Maybe they would have taken him in the 3rd round. It did a lot to.
Wasn't even an option.
He was which pick in the 3rd round was he?
He was. I mean, when does the 3rd round start? Pick 61. I mean, he had 15th pick in the 3rd. It couldn't have been many.
What number did you say it was?
76. 3rd round started, pick 64, so like the 12th. I mean,
yeah. Who knows? They might have liked him more than the safety from Penn State.
Pretty nuts that like.
Because you could argue if they drafted a linebacker at the same spot where they took Brown, you like that. Like to me, safety and line.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I guess your 2 linebackers are signed, so safety's a little more urgent. But either one, you could have used a guy. Sorry, what were you going to say?
The NFL draft's crazy. Like this guy from Sac State gets drafted, sandwiched between a guy from Ohio State and Tennessee. But then Tucker Kraft, who I'd been hearing about, South Dakota State has a tight end drafted. Then it goes North Carolina, Oregon. It's those names are in there, but they are usually sandwiched between Bama, Georgia, Iowa, right, Minnesota, UC Davis, but then it's like 4 more, Florida, Miami,
God, I'll tell you. I guess if I'm a small school defensive end, I might just try to get switched to tight. I mean, yeah, small school defensive end, I might try to get switched to tight end.
Yeah.
If you're big enough, it feels to me like if you're 6'4", maybe you're not a pass rusher. You could get drafted in the 3rd round, the 4th round of the NFL draft as a tight end if you can catch.
For sure.
Where the defensive end, there's so many of these guys that are just freaks.
Yeah.
I mean, the Niners took a guy who ran a 4.40 in the 5th round at defensive end from Georgia, 6'4", 250.
Something's got to be. I want maybe just a backup. I mean, it's hard to crack the lineup there. I mean, is he drafted that high? Is he a 3rd round pick if he's the pass rusher at UCLA where he's getting many more reps? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know enough. I got to do some recon on him.
4.48. We got Warriors, Lakers, by the way.
Can I just? I've been getting a lot of heat.
4?
I think people. You and I talked about this over the last couple weeks, but like, people are just flabbergasted. Like, how could you not root for the Kings? I'd argue, like, if I had, I don't.
You mean
care
like
about
people like close people, like, aren't you from Stack? Aren't you rooting for the Kings?
A lot of people, yeah. I mean, every angle, people on social media, people. If it was the 49ers, I don't necessarily care about the Giants right now because they're terrible and like I'm just I hate Gabe Kapler, but like you're never gonna find me like I might actually kind of like the colors, but I'm not like gonna become a Dodger fan. I'm not. I would never start rooting for the Rams. I think we're looking at this a little differently. Like the Kings, most of my life were terrible, and no one really paid attention to them, right? I mean, in our youth, they were so god awful that it was like. I grew up in the 90s. Like, I watched Michael Jordan NBC in the morning. Like, if you asked me, like, at 12 years old, who are you a fan of? I'd be like, Chicago Bulls. I love Michael and Scotty, right? I would have known more. Fan. I would have known more about Charles Barkley or John Stockton. The NBA was much more built on the pillars of those type guys. It's not like I lived in New York and I rooted for the Bulls and I had the Knicks. The Kings were the bar of the joke. And then for like 3 or 4 years, they were really good.
Which we were in high school and it was awesome.
It was really cool. And then they immediately didn't just kind of get bad again. They set the standard in pro sports. Like, there were many times they made, like, the Raiders and Browns look competent. Like, they were the joke.
And keep in mind, unlike football, like, everyone's not on TV, national TV all the time, every year. So you and I moved away from Davis. I didn't watch them. I moved away. They're not on television. I couldn't watch them for 15 years.
But I think their playoff streak was 17.
No, I know. I'm just saying, like, not only were they bad, you couldn't have watched them if you wanted to for 15 years. They were so irrelevant. They were never playing a big game on TNT.
They were completely irrelevant. I didn't even follow wins or losses. None of it mattered. Yeah. None of it mattered. Every draft pick they picked sucked. It was whatever. I just kind of followed the NBA. And then you and I, you move to the Bay Area, we get the radio show. Steph and Clay kind of happens, and it's like going to all those games. I started rooting for them.
It's like we're 8 years old again.
Yeah, it was fucking awesome. And you know what? So did the rest of the country. You see the television ratings? That they became the Bulls. And it wasn't like I started rooting for them and they're in Florida. They were literally down the street. Could have conversations with their coaches. Fucking know the owner's kid. Talk to Clay on the bench, whatever. Remember that one time? It was like, I just follow them. I've literally watched all their games for a decade. I've watched a total, beside this year, of like 5 Kings games. You did their post game in the height of their just irrelevancy. Like, it wasn't
and dysfunction. I mean, it was it was irrelevant.
George Karl.
It was so hard to root for it to succeed. Like, that was the part that was crazy.
You couldn't. It doesn't. When I went to the game or when I was watching the series, I wasn't rooting for the Kings to like suck or be a joke. I still like. It was cool. I'm glad Sack has something going. But like what you saw the other night, Game 7, what we witnessed in Game 5, the greatness of being able to win those 2 away games. It's like that. I'm not rooting for the Warriors because I think like there's a cute little story. I've been invested now for a decade. It's unlike anything I've ever seen beside the things of like Shaq and Kobe or Tom Brady and the Patriots or Michael Jordan. Like it's an all-timer. Tiger Woods. It's on the short list of like we're never seeing this again. And I've been literally invested. So yeah, like at the end of the day, whenever this ends, like I'm rooting for the Kings, but like kinda. I mean, I don't care. Like Sabonis doesn't do that much for me. They just will never have what I've invested into Steph, Clay, and Draymond. When those guys leave, I won't care as much anymore. But as long as those guys are around, and I'm quadrupling down this series, I fucking hate the Lakers. I have no hate for the Kings. I love their fans.
That's where the Kings fandom kind of works here. Is as a Kings fan, you really hate the Lakers, and then you morph it into what the Lakers are now, and it translates. I don't know if you saw.
I saw someone do a poll though, and I saw a lot of people say that they're going to root for the Lakers because they're
fans.
Yeah, because ultimately the Lakers, like that's 20 years ago now. Like they wanted to be what the Warriors.
I'm not big on like Twitter accounts, but the Kings tweeted after Game 7, beat LA, like handshake emoji.
Oh,
like if there's something we can agree on, it's that, right? We hate the Lakers.
Well, and don't you think like when that game ended,
Kings fan rooting for the Lakers is insane. Like that is insane to me.
I completely agree. I mean, Kerr,
that's crazier than rooting for the Warriors.
Kerr and Mike Brown had a longer embrace than most couples have had in the last like 5 years. Draymond went on after like, yeah, let's face it, most players we've faced over the last decade. He didn't name names, but it was Harden, Russ, Blake Griffin, the long list of frauds. You go in and you lose respect for them after you play them. Fox is the opposite. Like these guys are coming. 100%. They wax poetic about this group.
Yeah. And Monk, like they play hard. The coach is likable. I think Fox is like watching those 7 games rocketed up my list of he's at the top. If you said, all right, you're gonna starting 2023, 2024 NBA season, you got to watch a game a night. Like all of a sudden the Kings are really high on that list, right? Just because of De'Aaron Fox.
And I guess the way I should, try to explain this is you have to earn my basketball watching time. I don't make money off watching basketball. So if I'm watching it, it's really more of a passion. And the Warriors are an enjoyable watch. Now, Fox earned that, right? You couldn't pay me. Like I think the Sixers play tonight. Embiid's out. I will not give my time to watch James Harden play basketball. I will probably watch very, very little of that series.
Well, that series is easy to me. It's like if you tell me there's a game tonight and it's 8 minutes left and it's tied, I'm watching. I'm interested. Like, I just want to see somebody's going to win, somebody's going to lose. I'll turn it on and I'll root for somebody. I don't know who. Right? But you're not getting tip-off.
No.
Yeah. I think part of it is you were not – it's not like you were a diehard from age 8 to age – right, 8. Like you said, it was the 90s.
They were like a 25-win team. When I was born, the Giants were sweet. The fucking 49ers were like – the Yankees, I mean, it was hard to even balance that. The basketball, their status relative to the other 2 sports around us in Northern California was such a distant third. The only thing that matters, like, the Bulls come in March. The Bulls come in March. And luckily back in 95 or 92 or 97, you knew Michael would play. And we've talked about this before. The equivalent now, like, the Kings would immediately be skipped. That level team in the 90s, what it is now, like that would be a rest day for all the Swede players.
Oh, right. Back then you didn't skip days.
You could go to a game. I remember going to a game.
MJ.
You might have gone. Maybe you did. I don't know. I went with AJ, AJ's dad. Maybe it was like EG or Chris Dance, and like they were playing the late 90s Sixers, and Allen Iverson dropped like 48. It was awesome.
There for that.
You might have been Chris, but it was just, I just remember, and it pisses me off now. People are like, you hate the NBA. No, I hate that knowing that Allen Iverson never would have played in that game now. He would have, but like the equivalent of him skips that game. Just a fuck you to the paying customer. And I just want to watch.
I just want to know I'm watching the Star tonight. Baseball tells you, I know 2 weeks in advance if I'm seeing the starting pitcher or not, right? I used to do it all the time as a kid. We go to baseball games all the time. You would look, when did the guy pitch? I'd count up their games and try to figure out who we're seeing. Right? All the time, every time I went to a baseball game as a kid. Am I getting Matt Cain today? As a kid, but when young Matt Cain or whoever, right?
Yeah. Lincecum pitching tonight?
Lincecum? Yeah. It was very simple. You can count on it. But the Kings are back. The one thing I didn't say this during the series because obviously I was rooting for the Warriors too, which my mom, I talked to her yesterday, she was not happy about, but the Kings have not had a good uniform in our lifetime, I don't think. When we were kids and they were playing the Lakers, they had their uniforms were like the necks. If you go back and look, their necks were all stretched out. Their uniforms now are hideous. I don't know who's in charge of the uniforms, but I don't think the Kings have had a good-looking uniform in our lives.
See, I don't think they look too terrible. I don't notice them.
I think the shorts are bad. The shorts have to be cool. They don't have good shorts. But did you see any of the highlights from the Mexico game that the Giants played the Padres?
Wasn't there like 15 home runs hit in that game?
Yeah, the first game, I guess Tatis hit a homer that based on the exit velocity and launch angle, it would have been it had a 7% chance of being a hit, but it was a home run because the elevation's 2,000 feet higher than Denver.
Mexico City's where they're playing?
Yeah, Mexico City. And I guess the field's kind of shitty.
Not Azteca. They don't turn that thing into a baseball, do they?
No, they play. I don't think it was Azteca. They played this place at a place where I guess there's a racetrack that goes around the outside of the stadium.
I love Mexico.
like cars racetrack. You know,
I thought you meant horse. Okay, yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, not horse.
It'd be long. Yeah.
So that's pretty unique. But the Padres had like these uniforms made especially for the games in Mexico because they were the home team. And the Giants just wore their regular uniforms, which I thought was weird. Like if one team is going to wear Mexican-themed jerseys,
why not go Gigantes or something?
Yeah, right? Maybe they did. I don't know. I didn't see either of the games. I did hear Ron Wotus say that they like the biggest cheer was like for the mariachi band in between like in between like the fourth and fifth innings or whatever. The Padres were putting on sombreros after they hit home runs.
That's pretty cool.
Oh, they did. Matt on the stream. Pink Onion Pizza said that they wore the Gigantes jerseys. I just mean like that's not good enough when one team does like the full outfit, and it's like they just wore the T-shirt. And it's like, it's a week. It's like going to Halloween. Somebody wears a sweet costume and you just wear a shirt that says security on it, and you're like, this is my costume. I was like, oh, why didn't you get ready for this thing by wearing a full-on?
I feel like if the NFL did that and did the equivalent, that there'd be a lot of New York Times think pieces about like appropriation or some bullshit.
You saying if they went to Mexico and
like the Cowboys
for touchdowns?
Yeah, but even like change, their name to
Los
whatever.
Cowboys.
Yeah, like the Texans.
They just put Los in front.
Yeah,
Los Suns.
Exactly. Giants Gigantes, like Giants Cowboys or whatever the game was.
Yeah.
I feel like again, I don't know who would actually consume that, but it would get ridden, and maybe it's out there on the internet somewhere.
I don't know.
I loved it. Not that I watched. I just saw maybe it was 11 home runs. Wasn't the final score like 16-10 or something?
Yeah, the first game was a crazy game, and then yesterday was like I actually watched some of that game because Yastrzemski got hurt on the bad turf. I guess it was like super thin turf. Wotus said it was. He's like it wasn't quite veteran stadium. It was thicker than that, but.
Well, remember the Chiefs Rams had to yank their game out?
Yeah, that was the turf to me is kind of crazy that they played on it. That the players didn't complain. I don't know if the players have complained. But
feels like everyone sniffs.
Game was like 6-7-4 or something.
Feels like everyone sniffs around Mexico City because it's technically for us, it's the closest. Like it makes more sense logistically than London. But London would be much safer in terms of the infrastructure there. Right?
Wotus said they're all eating peanut butter and jellies. Like everyone's afraid to eat.
Yeah, the water situation. Like you go to London, you're not worried about all the other stuff.
They're playing. So the Cubs are playing in England this year.
Yeah, I think in Mexico it's so much easier. Yet there's so much more shit that is out of your control that are like, God damn, we got to bring 8 million bottles of Aquafina with us because we can't fucking
water. The over-under yesterday, Armando, was 20. Said it was 20. It was the largest over-under in the history of baseball.
Uncrustables with us because we don't have any food to eat. Warriors in 5.
God, I hope you're right.
Here's the other thing.
Jordan Poole's got to play his way back onto the team.
Honest to God, I would feel this way. once it was pretty clear like the Lakers were going to win the series early on, the Grizzlies were gutless. Dylan Brooks, Jesus, talk about a fall from grace. That guy's a laughingstock. Is that like I do not think the Kings could beat the Lakers. I have zero faith. And as we saw, like the Kings, everyone's like the game's could have gone this way. Well, they didn't, and for a reason. Like it's because Steph Curry, Draymond, Clay, these guys are just
Steph went
better
for
than
50
you.
in Game 7. Like it's not a could have gone the other way.
And they broke you
They
in
did
Game
shoot
5.
1 of 17 from 3 in the second half, but
But they can't get a rebound. They broke you in Game 5.
minus
Like
20, I think. On
I feel like the Lakers would have done the same. I just don't think you could have beat the Lakers. And the Warriors, listen, I'm going to talk a ton of shit. They just better win this series. Win this series. Listen, you can get bounced in that. Whatever. This season for me is not about a title, though. It would be like
it's like then you want to lose to KD. You want to lose to the Nuggets.
Yeah, but I think you could just you beat the Kings and the Lakers that way. It'd feel if you're gonna go out in the third round, you could do that.
Yeah.
But you just gotta beat. You gotta.
NBA playoffs are long, man. They can be a long road to a championship. Every time you're like, God, how have they done this many times? Like, just beat the Kings was exhausting.
Why not? I was talking to on the golf course the other day, and they're like, God, it feels like the series has been going on for a month. I'm like, fuck.
Only 2 more to get to the finals. Yep.
Kings, yes. Sometimes this is not trying to be a shot at you, Kings fans, but you have this, and I see it come out because a lot of them have like they're Niner people and they talk shit about the Raiders. Well, the Raider in you comes out when you discuss this hierarchy. It's like, yeah, you got to earn that fucking hierarchy, guys.
Here's the thing I never understand, and this is the same thing, is like you get pit like. We all knew about we knew about the Kings, and all you other people that are coming now, you're just on the bandwagon. It's like, yeah, that's called growing a fan base. I don't think Joe Lacob's complaining about all the people that came to the Warriors. It's how he built a new stadium, right? It's like, and I used to see it all the time when I was doing A stuff and they were good, and people would be like, "Who are these other reporters who only show up for the playoffs?" Like I'd see media would, and like, are you kidding me? Like, well, how could you possibly complain about that? How could you complain about more people wanting to be the fan of your team?
You know who never talks like that? The Yankees.
Lakers fans,
the
Yankees
Cowboys,
fans.
the Lakers. Yeah. But even just the reporters around there, they're just a big picture.
Oh, I see. Now they're showing up. Okay. Yeah, most people won't spend $80 for a Tuesday night when you're 17 games under 500. It's not worth their time.
I'll tell you, I do wonder if I haven't checked the ticket price. So I would guess the Lakers. Warriors tickets near the court are going to be outrageously high. Can you imagine Game 3 in LA? What that thing's going to go for?
Well, I remember the tickets for LeBron like breaking the scoring record were outrageous.
Well, it's got to be bigger Game 3 in LA for that.
Yeah, than that. I agree, 100%.
I bet there's going to be a line where like, how famous do you got to be to get near the front?
You see, Jack was there the other night.
Has he been a recluse? Someone said the last like 5 years.
I told you that because I talked to a guy when I was in LA for a basketball game who's part of the Lakers, like basketball, like behind the scenes, like TV stuff.
Doesn't come to games anymore.
Yeah, he said he doesn't come to games anymore. And you can see like he's just you could see. I mean, he's older. I don't know how old is he?
80. I would guess.
Yeah. Was he?
Was that his kid? That was his son next to him, right?
That who it was? I don't know. 86.
Yeah, I mean, he's not a spring chicken.
Yeah.
Do you expect to see him there? Is he the most famous Laker fan?
Yeah, him, Larry David. Is Diane Cannon still
But you would say that he is their Spike Lee, right?
Yeah. He's number 1. Jimmy Goldstein.
But
He was at the Lakers series.
Jimmy bounces around a little bit.
I know, he was at the Kings games.
So was Kyrie. And John and Kyle drove up for it. I would imagine.
Did you see the picture? Somebody tagged us in that photo.
Was that Kyle's kid with the Texas hat? Had to be, right?
Didn't see. Was that on TV? You saw him?
Well, yeah, it was Kyle John sitting right behind Kyrie. Is that the picture?
I saw a photo. No, I saw somebody tagged us in a photo of like they were like 5 rows behind them, and he got the John and Kyle to turn around for a selfie with like the guys in it, holding it, and then they're in the background like smiling. It was a nice photo. So that's what I saw. I didn't see what you saw.
They must. I mean, I get that's from Santa Clara to Sacramento. I mean, they just had the draft. I mean, those guys must really like basketball.
Game 7, yeah. I mean, you think they just up and back, get a car service?
I mean,
You
I don't
wouldn't
know.
private jet it, would you? It's a Sunday. Traffic should be workable.
Helicopter?
Seems a little crazy.
Could just have, the Niners SUV, the driver take you. Does he get to go to the game? Does he wait outside for you?
Waits outside, yeah.
It is downtown. I guess it's not like a parking lot situation. So
They're probably under the stadium. They got a spot for the VIPs.
it looked like Kyle's
Kyle's
son. Yeah.
Texas fan.
Yeah. Okay.
On that note, later, everybody. Thanks for hanging. Adios.
Peace.